I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, naturopathic doctor. Okay, welcome to another episode of Women's Health Unplugged. I'm so excited for this episode today. Caitlin Johnson's joining me today. She's a registered dietitian and nutritionist. She has advanced training in functional medicine. She has the best PCOS Instagram feed I have followed yet to date. And I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today, Caitlin. You offer such a evidence-based and refreshing view of how women need to look at their PCOS. Thank you so much for spending time with me this afternoon.
I'm so happy to be here. So happy to speak to your audience and hopefully have a message of hope and, give some nice pearls to help people out. So thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
It's going to be good because this conversation around how women can lean into understanding their body and even trusting their body, helping women feel like their PCOS, like you said, has hope, right? This is not necessarily an infertility diagnosis, which is one of your big messages.
Not an infertility diagnosis, not like my story is written before me. I need to be fat, hairy, and full of acne the rest of my life. I hesitate to even use that word, but those are the words my clients use to me as I just feel like when I got diagnosed, the doctor was telling me this was going to be my life and here are some pills to handle it a little bit. And there's so much more hope and there's so much more that you can do. That's the power's in your hands. And that really is hopefully the message people get from me is that there is so much that you can do to manage your health. And the story is not written before you. We can change that story.
Amazing. And that's such an empowering message. Can you walk us through, how did you get to this place? I know you've shared online a little bit about your personal story. How did you get to this place of spending so much time on women with PCOS and this level of knowledge you have and get to this place in your career? Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, happy to. So I was like a motivated, really smart kid kind of. I graduated high school early. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I took time off and did like a Bible study program because I was always really service minded, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. So in the middle of this program and I decide I'm going to train for a marathon. And I, for 6 months, start running like crazy and gain 60 pounds. So it was whoa, what is happening here? What is happening inside of my body? So I went and saw a doctor. I gained all this weight. My acne's getting really bad. I had recently gone off the hormonal birth control, and it was kind of like a perfect storm for my hormones to go haywire. And they said that they thought it was something called PCOS. They were going to run some tests. I was going to come in and do an ultrasound, and we'd have a diagnosis or not. So of course they ran my blood work. I had higher levels of androgens, which is something that they're looking for. They confirmed on an ultrasound that I had polycystic ovaries. And the doctor basically walked in and said, yep, we were right. Listen to how he said that. We were right. You do have PCOS. And I'm sitting naked in the doctor's office, just finished the ultrasound, crinkly paper gown on me, crinkly, the most uncomfortable position I could be in, then delivered this diagnosis. And I'm okay, well, I'm 18 and a half, almost 19. What is PCOS? I'd never heard of it, right? Just uncomfortable in my new chubby body, And from my perspective, again, I even hate using those words. And he said, well, it's the number one reason in America women can't get pregnant. And I never wanted to be anything other than a mother. I didn't know if I wanted a career. I didn't know what my pursuits were. I wasn't married. I wasn't even dating someone seriously, but I remember thinking that cannot be my future. I will not be a mom because of whatever this PCO thing is. So I knew enough to say okay, that's a statistic about PCOS, right? That's not what PCOS is. What is PCOS? And he said, Well, it's something that's wrong with your hormones. It's why you have these polycystic ovaries. We're going to put you back on hormonal birth control and give you a prescription for metformin, and the weight should come back off. And if it doesn't, then that's the thing we need to do. You need to focus on getting the 60 pounds back off. And like just basically walked out of the room. I was left there with this hole in my heart, like hope slashed, but very motivated for that not to be my story. So that was the beginning. That was like the genesis of my story, like the music changes in the movie when I think about my life, where it was like, okay, I'm walking through the rain, trying to find the answers and doing everything wrong. Went raw for a year because this nutritionist in my Bible study told me to do that. Like, if you have insulin resistance and you're just going to eat fruit and like anything that doesn't have to be cooked beyond a certain temperature, it's going to be mostly carb. It was like the exact wrong thing for me. I tried everything. Like I even became a spin instructor so that I'd force myself to work out so that I would maybe manage my weight again someday. Like I think back to those moments and how much insecurity I had and how lost I felt, like in an ocean swimming with not knowing what direction to even go in. That shaped my whole life, shaped everything. My dating experiences, like telling people if we get serious, I may end up not being able to give you kids someday. Like I think about this girl I was 15 years ago and I like it breaks my heart. But what I was a fighter. So I decided it had to be something more than just gynecological hormones, like what I thought of female hormones. There had to be something more going on. So I started slowly getting a degree in nutrition and I started seeing a naturopath and I started getting acupuncture and I started exercising differently and really began to gain some headway in my PCOS, all while getting an education that I think was mostly crap. Like I feel like the nutrition degree that I got in a very science heavy California state school was like very funded by agriculture and dairy farmers. Like I went through this degree knowing I'm learning how to think with the scientific brain, but I don't think I agree with what I'm being taught about calories in and calories out. And so I knew when I was done with my degree and if I went straight to get credentialed as a dietitian that I would want more training and I would need more help if I wanted to treat people the way I was seeing naturopathic medicine to help me, the way I was seeing Chinese medicine help me, the way I was seeing just lifestyle management help me. So I went on to I did an internship, moved through the internship, did some advanced training with a few different kind of big names in the field and their different, like functional medicine, women's herbalism, things like that, and just slowly started seeing patients. I opened up a practice, put my name on the wall, started walking. I took everybody at first: weight loss, heart disease, IBS, like I would take anything. And then I was married and we were trying to get pregnant. And even with my PCOS, as well managed as it was, we still struggled with infertility for almost 3 years. And that was kind of like the second burrowing in where I read every research study I could get my hands on. I read any book about PCOS, ovulation, fertility awareness, diet, supplements. Like it looked like in our bedroom I was writing a dissertation or a book for myself, which maybe someday I will. And I figured out how to treat my body because I went back to the OB and we were trying to answer the question of if I was ovulating. And even the information she was giving me made me realize that I knew more about my PCOS than she did. And she didn't have the tools to help me if I wanted to approach it naturally. She had the tools to maybe start marching me down, additional medicines that we could try and then refer me to a reproductive endocrinologist. But she didn't know how to help me even tell if I was ovulating. The information she gave me was just wrong. And so this is where my career evolution, like really, I don't see anything anymore except for PCOS and infertility. For the most part, I don't even see somebody that just wants to manage their PCOS because nothing gives me more joy than helping somebody get pregnant and bring home a healthy baby. And that's rambling, but this is where I really feel like if I had had me 5 years ago when I was in the middle of this struggle, 6 years ago when I was just starting it, I probably would have more children by now than I have because I could have had way more of a head start on what to do and what to focus on. So that's how I got here. It's kind of I'm treating what I have to a degree, but I'm treating what I love, and I have such a passion for the work.
think the music changed a few times through that
Yeah.
story,
Yeah, I
actually.
guess it did.
And
I
then I'm
think
at
that
POV and I can hear the music. It gets
like the crescendo, like
yeah, yeah.
da da da, insert LH ovulation predictor kits, and everybody in the audience knows it's the wrong thing.
Yeah, but that's so important, right? Like, and that comes through in your work. And I think part of the reason why you're one of my favorite Instagrams to follow is just the like, there's like the realness slash like
Mhm.
vulnerability about that. And you and I have talked about that, which we'll come back around to. Um, but also there, you can tell like how important it is to you for these women to just like straight up understand what's going on with them, because
Mm,
that empowerment piece is often missing in the way that we work with women, period, right? Whether they
mhm,
have PCOS or not. We're often in very much this prescribing, like, we can't wait for the patient to finish what they're saying so that we can start saying what we want to say to them,
mhm,
versus the approach of like, listening to her experience, helping empower her to know that there's hope and that there's possibility, and then helping strategize with her versus, slide her a piece of paper across the table that says she needs to lose weight.
mhm.
Um,
Or take
that's
these
why
12 supplements or
yeah,
something.
take these
It's
12
like,
supplements.
because don't you feel this, that honestly, like a woman's intuition, or the greatest value I have as a clinician is what my patient or client shows up with and says to me about their experience, about their body. They are the expert on their body. They may not know what to do next, but oftentimes, actually, I find that they do. They just need permission that it's okay for them to walk that path and focus on it. They often come in knowing what their biggest struggle is, even. They just need your help bridging that gap of where's the solution and how do I get there. And that empowerment is incredible. And I feel like there's a movement in women working with women these days where we are seeing, it's almost, we know how much more important it is. And not to say a male practitioner can't do this, but what struggle women even have to get an accurate diagnosis these days, and what a woman's taken to get to the point of sitting across with you, knowing what they are struggling with, but how do they move forward? And I think you're great at that in your work too, because that empowerment piece and helping somebody to believe that they can make the changes is really actually most of the battle.
Mhm. And to just like trust, right? I think, even I can think of people I saw today who are like, I'm spotting in between cycles and I've noticed like changes in my skin. And I'm also like, not feeling myself like mood wise. I think these are related, right? And she almost like, it's just question, right?
Hmm.
Like raises her
Yeah.
voice at the end of the sentence, like, I think they're
Uh-huh.
related. And it's like we've
Uh-huh.
like taken away this, I'm going to use the word intuition, even if that sounds flaky. Like we've taken away this trust that women should just have in themselves
Hmm.
to know that those things are related, because we have made her feel like A, her experience is not really that important, and B, that you know well, how could they possibly be related, right? Like
Yeah.
it's one symptom, one question, one appointment kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, this came up recently for me too. Somebody said I started taking metformin and my anxiety became terrible. And but my doctor said it's not documented as a side effect of metformin. I said, "Who cares what your doctor said? That's the only thing that changed. Like trust yourself. If you think that that medication is not right for you, then that's something to talk to the doctor about. No matter what the reason is, it's okay for you to decide with your doctor to come off of that medication. That is it. Women's intuition, Aviva Ram calls it women's way of knowing. I mean, I think people talk about it in different ways, but trusting that you know more about your body, or to trust that your body is there to support you. And sometimes that these symptoms that feel so adversarial are actually just warning signs. The acne is not there. It's not your body's way of betraying you for not feeding it the right thing. It's just saying, help, I might need something different. It's the SOS signal.
Hmm. And I think women with PCOS often do have that feeling at war with their body experience, right? Or that their body is betraying them.
Betraying them. I hear that all the time. My body's betrayed me.
Hmm.
And think about that in the space of fertility. The one thing you should be able to do is be a mom. The one thing you should be able to, like, I am a woman to have a baby, I hear people say, like, and it's the one thing I can't get my body to do. And so they really do feel betrayed or forsaken or at battle with their body. They're fighting their body to get to do it. And if we can reframe that to, I'm supporting my body, I'm listening to what my body's telling me, and I am hearing that, and I'm going to make some changes. So that you almost turn it into a positive conversation, a support. And I often like the things I hear my clients say about themselves, I will say to them, like, if you were my best friend, I would not let you talk to me or you like that. And you're talking to yourself like that. Like, I want you to start envisioning yourself as this like beautiful 4-year-old girl or this first grader. Would you tell that girl that she was fat? Would you tell that girl that she wasn't going to be a mom someday? Like, let's retrain that inner dialogue. No, you would never say that to somebody that little and that you love and is so cute. Like, I want you to start talking to yourself as kindly as you would your 4-year-old niece that you love to the moon, and if in that one change, it gives me goosebumps even saying that one change of that inner dialogue, the change that can occur in terms of your stress hormones, your happiness factor, like it can, if we can retrain your brain to be positive about some of these things, we can actually see that translate in your health and your fertility.
Hmm. Not to mention, some of our greatest barriers to behavior change and self care is how women feel.
Mhm.
Right? It's like when women are
Mhm.
talking like, "Well, my hormones are making me gain weight." I'm like, "Well, no, not really. Your hormones are making you feel terrible." And
Mhm.
feeling terrible gets in the way often of
Mhm.
us taking care of ourselves, whether
Mhm.
it's sleep or food cravings or fatigue.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily the hormone, right? It's like that
Mhm.
impact it has. So when women are in that cycle of, feeling at war with their body and not having that mindset of like
Mhm.
that's not helping us, right? Because
Mhm.
that's becoming a barrier for them to be able to support themselves in the way we need them to. Like we need them to show up and do the things every day. But
Mhm.
if they are in that like, hopelessness, that's hard to do.
It is hard to do, absolutely. And it's a cycle. And women with PCOS are more likely to have depression. Women with PCOS are more likely to suffer from anxiety. And those things can really get in the way. And yet, like even yesterday, I was talking to somebody 8 weeks into some major diet changes that just yielded balanced blood sugar. And she's already saying her energy levels are so much better. She's able to prep her food on Sunday because she's not hungover from the breakfast of bagel and vanilla latte that she had. Like she actually has the energy to get up and go and do something to set herself up for success for the week. And maybe she's not pregnant yet 8 weeks later, but she's well on her way to getting the hormones to do what we need them to do and make the cycle easier for her. And celebrating those things along the way is important too.
Mhm. And I'm sure you've experienced like with your work in fertility, and I see the same. Like, so often we talk about fertility as this like dichotomous outcome, right? It's yes, no, baby, no, right?
Hmm.
Pregnant, not. And
Hmm.
yet, like, and that really like takes away from us helping that woman feel better in her body that is trying to get pregnant versus us just focusing on a positive pregnancy test.
Right.
Um, but it's hard to slow that down when women feel like they're in this like race for a positive pregnancy test or are
Well,
sucked into that process of fertility care.
and it is yes, no, and usually it's, "I wanted it yesterday." By the
For
time
sure.
they get to you or me, it's like and oftentimes, I think I'd love to hear your experience. By the time they get to me, they've actually usually tried everything. It's not that they're afraid of IUI or IVF, it's that IUI or IVF didn't work, and
Mhm,
so the Hail Mary is, "Well, let's try everything natural that we can."
mhm,
So it's like yes, no, and so there isn't quite the excitement over maybe what should be exciting and that you never saw yourself ovulate before and now we saw 2 in a row. That's actually really positive.
mhm,
And you might need to reframe that and celebrate that success. I just had somebody message me today like, "Oh, I got my period." And I'm thinking as I'm reading this, it's so disappointing and I don't want to downplay. I lived those. I got the period over and over and over again when I was looking for the positive pregnancy test. That is hard. But it was the first time she ever ovulated on her own. Her cycle was way shorter than it normally was. Like, it was so positive that sometimes you need somebody from the outside in reflecting that back to you and saying, "Look in the mirror. Look what we've done. This is incredible."
mhm.
Um,
I find it so
yeah.
interesting that the treating like foundational health is the Hail Mary.
I know. That's
right?
yeah, I know. But that is our medical system. And it's the way that people think, have almost been trained to think. It's like, if there's a problem, let's go find the medical solution, surgery or pill. And then if that doesn't work, like I see this when I used to treat a lot of GI stuff like IBS, or, like there's something that the gastroenterologist couldn't resolve. We'll just send them to Caitlin. She does that weird functional medicine testing. She'll figure it out with them. And then we often do. And then, it's like, why is this always the last thing when all the other things don't work?
Mhm. And when we're talking about PCOS, that approach is, ignoring that we don't just want to get pregnant, we want to have a healthy pregnancy,
Yes.
right? Like we want to lower the risk of gestational diabetes or a preeclampsia
Preeclampsia
or
or
preterm
preterm
labor
labor. Yes.
or
All those things
yes.
that can and do happen with PCOS. And I got to tell you, I don't know that my mom had PCOS, but she struggled with infertility with my sister and my brother. And then I was kind of like the oopsie last one, but she had preeclampsia. I had a grandma die of preeclampsia. So like I look back and I wonder, did my genetics set me up for a lot of these things? And so I approach not just getting pregnant, but I want to have the lowest risk of all these things that I can going into pregnancy. And the amazing thing is the same things that help you conceive naturally and manage your PCOS are the same things that are going to give you the best shot. We can't wipe away any chance of gestational diabetes. We can't wipe away any chance of preeclampsia. We don't even really know exactly what causes preeclampsia still. But we can lower the risk of all these things by optimizing things in the preconception stage. And even if you don't have PCOS, you still want to optimize things in the preconception stage. Because think about, there's nothing more sacred than what you're about to do. You're about to grow another human inside of your body. Your body is the environment for almost 10 months. So this is a really incredible time to set your health up for success so that you can not only ensure a healthy baby, but what we're really starting to see in research is this thing called like fetal programming, where what you eat and what happens while this baby is in utero, while you're growing it in your uterus, can impact its health for its lifetime. So that, I say that out loud, that can feel really heavy, like, oh, this burden. But it is a weighty thing. And the same thing that's going to help you feel better in pregnancy, the same thing that's going to help you get pregnant are the same things that's going to translate to a healthier outcome for your offspring.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's amazing. I spent a lot of time looking at the, like, intergenerational, the situation with PCOS and why we think it's happening and running, and why is it more in this generation than the one
Mhm.
before, and spent a lot of time on that, and I think it's so fascinating, right? And it really brings us back to that the say, like, I always use the same phrase, but I'm like, fertility technology is like icing on the cake. And then I'll say to my woman, I'm like, you're the cake, right? Like, let's not
Mhm.
forget that, like, your underlying health is still the most important thing, whether we do IUI, whether you do IVF, whether have a natural cycle, that still
Mhm.
all has to go back in you. That has to happen inside you. And
Yeah.
so,
Even the research, like eating organic, people have better outcomes in IVF. And so some people will go, oh, it's not worth the money. And then you're like, well, this is the one time in your life, if you're going to go spend 18 grand to put a baby in your uterus,
yeah, we better
this is
set
the
it up
time
for
to spend an
success.
extra $100 at the grocery store on
Yeah.
organic, right? So the research, and this is where I think you really have to find somebody, if you are going to work with somebody that is looking at the evidence so that they can help tee you up for making the changes that are going to be the most impactful for you, this human sitting in front of us. That it's not just like, well, with PCOS, these are the things we run through.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
I live in strawberry fields. Literally, I live in California. Three sides of my home are strawberries, which tops the list every year for the highest pesticide residue food, the dirty dozen every year. And I can smell this pesticide that gets sprayed on it. And I conceived and had both my babies in this home. And that was on my mind. What am I breathing? And what is in my drinking water that they tell me is safe, but is it really? And so, looking at the human in front of you, I wouldn't think of that for somebody in the middle of Washington, surrounded by pine trees, where I grew up in Seattle. Very different environmental exposures, but I might be thinking more mold and other things that we might need to be considering. So that's the other piece of it, is really looking at the human in front of you and their picture and helping them make the best changes that's going to yield the best outcome for them.
So let's talk a little bit about cycle tracking, because this is something I think you do really well in educating women. And it's often a piece like that I need to spend a lot of time on with women when I first meet them. So
Mhm.
simple questions like, how long is your cycle? I will say, like in my 15 years of work, the like period tracker apps has really positively changed my work
Mhm.
experience for the
I'm
better,
sure it has. Yeah.
because so many more women are, even if they just throwing the first day of their period into an app,
It's
this
at
is,
least records and
yeah,
data.
this
Yeah.
is like miles ahead of where we were 10 years ago when I would say,
Mhm.
"When was your last period?" And she had no idea.
Mhm.
Um, but there's so much more to that cycle tracking piece for women with PCOS. We can't use all the same, we're going to come around to those testing strips. We can't use all the
Mhm.
same cues that we would maybe use in a woman who has a bang on perfect 28-day cycle. Can you help us, just by walking through, like, how do you educate women with PCOS about tracking their cycle and what to expect, and what a win actually looks like as far as us seeing
Yeah.
positive change?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I usually the conversation goes, at least in my DMs on Instagram, like, am I ovulating? I have a 60-day cycle. And I'm like, wow, I am not a fairy. I do not have magic powers. I do not know the answer to that. Or I have a regular cycle, but I don't think I'm ovulating. Could I be ovulating? Again, same answer. So, usually, what I need to help somebody understand that is more data. And they don't really know that they should be tracking this data and that it's really empowering to track this data. So, kind of the path that I help people walk is that is the one thing people tend to know, their cycle length. I know the first day of my period each and every time. Sometimes though, when you ask somebody their cycle length, what they actually tell you is how long they bleed for. So my cycle is 6 days long. You're like, no, 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 no. Are you telling me that you have a menstrual bleed for 6 days of your cycle? And so there's a lot of just like being a woman 101 that you have to teach people when we're starting to talk about fertility. So, how long is your cycle? That's usually in PCOS tells me a lot about maybe what type of PCOS I'm looking at. Do they have a regular cycle? 25, I would call, maybe even 26 days up to 35 days is pretty regular for what I would call a regular cycle in PCOS. But then there's like the next layer on top of that. Do you know if you're ovulating? Are you tracking anything beyond when you're bleeding? Are you spotting in between periods? Do you have something we call cervical fluid or cervical mucus? Because cervical fluid and where your cervix is in your vagina in relation to kind of the opening and what texture it is, these things are some of the most helpful previews for you to be able to say, I'm about to ovulate. Like it is time to get busy. We need to get in the bedroom. If you can see these very honestly easy to recognize changes if you know what you're looking for. So in cycle mapping, I typically start with trying to teach somebody to recognize cervical fluid because even if they can't confirm that they've ovulated for me, if I can just get them having sex when they're seeing fertile cervical mucus, we have more of a chance than we do if we're just shooting in the dark and picking days in between period to period. So that's the first thing that I want somebody to master is what is cervical fluid? What does fertile cervical fluid look like? Um, and how often am I seeing it in my cycle? Kind of the next layer up, I don't usually teach or harp on cervical position as much because I think reaching your fingers inside of your vagina and feeling for your cervix is not something everyone's comfortable doing, but most everyone will be comfortable taking toilet paper and wiping it across their vagina to their anus because they're doing that multiple times every day anyway. So that's a little bit easier buy in than teaching somebody to look for kind of the intricacies of their cervical position. So the next thing that I move on to is taking their basal body temperature. And I've kind of changed my tune on this over the years after working with so many women. All you need is like a $10 basal body temperature thermometer from CVS or Walgreens or Walmart, wherever you are in the world, you can usually get one for about $10. And a basal body temperature thermometer is just a thermometer that takes you to an extra degree of sensitivity. So instead of saying 36.7 degrees, it'll say 36.72. Instead of saying 98.7 degrees, it'll say 98.71. And it's not even really that extra decimal that matters to us so much. It's that the thermometer is a sensitive thermometer because we're looking for changes that are as intricate as zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.4 degrees Celsius shift or about half of a degree Fahrenheit to 1 degree Fahrenheit. So we're looking for pre-ovulatory numbers being lower. And then once you ovulate, we should see a consistent shift that comes up by half to 1 degree in Fahrenheit. So teaching somebody how to confirm ovulation helps them answer the question that they pose to me. Do I ovulate? All you need is a thermometer and some time every single morning when you wake up before you do anything else to track your temperature. When I say my tune has changed on this throughout time, is that I still find some resistance to women tracking their basal body temperature. And it comes for a number of different reasons. They don't want to wake up at the same time every day. Maybe they have interrupted sleep or they're shift workers. And so I've started recommending more often using some of these kind of advanced fertility wearables because it's a little bit easier buy-in, and more women are willing to do that than just use a thermometer every morning. But frankly, like if you can brush your teeth, you can get your basal body temperature tracked. You can answer the question of if you're ovulating for under $10 very confidently with just a little bit of time and a thermometer. So, first, cervical mucus, can I predict ovulation? And then can I confirm it with the thermometer? And then really just supporting women to feel confident in the information that they're looking at. Because if we can get some cycle data for 3 cycles in a row that you're ovulating, and then we can start looking at did we time sex well in those cycles, that can give us a really big indication of how easy it will be for me to help somebody get pregnant. If they're not ovulating, then we really need to focus not just on cycle tracking, but on improving the things that are going to help them ovulate. And I think a big gap that I see in the healthcare landscape is not really understanding this or trusting that they can do this, trusting that they can actually get this information for themselves. And I think that dichotomy you brought up, that wanting instant gratification, wanting to see a positive pregnancy test as the solution, we want that eventually, but first we need to see ovulation happening. Like no ovulation, no natural conception. We have to get you ovulating. So seeing improvements with clients that I work with looks like they come in with no cycle at all. We start seeing them cycling. We start seeing them ovulating. Or they come in with a 60 or a 90-day cycle. We start confirming ovulation towards the end of that. And then we start seeing, their next cycle, they ovulated on day 20 and their cycle was only 34 days long. Then the next cycle, they ovulated on day 18 and their cycle was supposed to be 32 days long, but maybe they got pregnant that cycle because not only have they gotten better at cycle tracking, they're getting better at seeing their cervical fluid and timing sex more optimally, and all the other things that we do to support their health to have a healthy, robust ovulation and enough progesterone and all the things. But I think helping women celebrate the successes along the way, the ovulating earlier in their cycle. And when you think about it, if you have 12, 13 cycles in a year, if you're ovulating, you had 12 or 13 chances. The typical PCOS patient that I work with comes in ovulating, if they're ovulating, at least cycling. They're cycling 4 to 5 times a year, maybe. If they're ovulating in those cycles, that's 4 to 5 chances. Even if all those eggs are viable, if you don't time sex well, and how could you if you don't know if you're ovulating? So your chances just shrink, 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 shrink. And that's where I will often say PCOS is so much more subfertility than infertility. It's just a matter of sometimes getting that timing right. And actually, it just takes longer because you have less chances or you don't know how to time sex well, dot, 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 dot.
So tell me your thoughts on ovulation predictor kits, because that's one, and I definitely I think when I first started practicing that they were inaccessible, right? Like they were very
Mhm,
expensive when I
mhm,
first started practicing, and it would be over $100 in OPK kits for a woman to successfully track her ovulation, get negatives on
mhm,
both sides of the positive
mhm.
tests, and now you can get them at the dollar store. I mean, certainly
Yeah.
I'm questioning the quality already.
Or by the hundreds on Amazon.
Yes,
Yeah.
by the hundreds. But what are your thoughts on the OPK kit? Because I think especially for women with PCOS, it can be such a false,
Sense of hope.
yeah, a false sense of
Yeah.
hope, and it's really not reading what we think it's reading
Mhm.
when it comes to PCOS, just based on the nature of what's happening hormonally for those women. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So for the listeners that don't really know, there's a few things you can pee on in your trying to conceive journey. There's a pregnancy test that's looking for a completely different hormone than an ovulation predictor kit. An ovulation predictor kit is looking for a hormone LH, so luteinizing hormone, the one that really surges right before ovulation. It's there all the time at a much lower degree, but it hits this kind of peak value on its own without its kind of companion in the fight, FSH, coming up with it. And so an ovulation predictor kit is looking for that peak, that surge. And what you see oftentimes in women with PCOS, and what I see more so in women with insulin resistant PCOS, is very high levels at baseline of this hormone we're looking for a surge in. So you're seeing 2, 3, sometimes even 4 times the value of what it would normally float around as just your baseline. So you're peeing on this stick looking for it to find a higher value, and you just always have a higher value. So you're seeing positive after positive after positive. I wrote this in an email recently. It's like, God, if you were seeing that many positives, you're ovulating that often, you would not be getting my emails. Like, you were fertile myrtle. You don't, it doesn't take a scientist to look at that and go, something's wrong here. I'm not ovulating this often. And for the listeners that may not know, you only ovulate one time in a cycle. So it's not possible to be ovulating so often. What I see more often than just seeing positive day after day after day is actually seeing multiple rounds of positives in a longer cycle. So somebody testing like day 10 through day 14, starting to see something get darker, 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 then it goes away. They don't ovulate. And then maybe day 21 or day 22, they start seeing it kind of get darker, darker, darker on the lines. I have so many problems with using the LH predictor kits. The first is that it removes you from trusting the signs that your body is giving you of this fertile cervical mucus, and trusting more in this test that's testing something that's probably off in your body anyway. So it's not very reliable, and it removes you from trusting your own body like one more step. The other main issue that I see is that some women, especially early on in their conceiving journeys, they pee on these sticks, they see it positive, they have all the sex, and then they let their foot off the gas. They're like relaxing until they see their period come or a pregnancy test, because they don't really understand that their body may be attempting to ovulate multiple times in a cycle, which is very common with PCOS, that they may actually miss another attempt at ovulation a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks later, but because they really haven't been looking for it anymore, they miss the actual time they do ovulate. So that's another kind of just big mistake I see in the employment of them. And this is really like part of my story. I went to the doctor after a year of trying to conceive, still trying to answer the question myself of if I was ovulating. And what she told me to do was go home and pee on ovulation predictor kits. And I knew my LH was high. And even at that, my cycles were still 60 days long. And I said, well, when do you want me to pee on these things? Like, how much is it going to cost me? Where do I even get that many sticks? She said, start peeing on them like day 12. And I'm thinking, oh, that's when I knew she didn't know anything about PCOS cycles. I had a 60-day long cycle. If I was ovulating, big if, it was like 2 weeks from the end of my cycle. It wasn't day 12, even day 20. It was like day 45, day 48. So that's kind of the other piece, is it ties you to something that's really triggering. You're used to peeing on sticks and you see a lot of negatives. And then you start peeing on sticks every day looking for when you should be having sex because you might be ovulating. It's just you're tied to your urine being this signal of anything. And it's the wrong thing to be looking for. It does work for someone with PCOS. But the other big issue with it is it gives you a 36-hour window, maybe, before you ovulate. If it's being employed well and it does see a correct surge in your body, you may have just missed 3.5 days of your fertile window. Like, you just lost out on valuable time that you could have been having sex, that maybe you were making fertile cervical mucus, but you didn't pay attention to that. And you're just relying on this test, because you can have sex, have ejaculate, have sperm inside of you for up to 5 days before you ovulate. And if you have fertile cervical mucus, some of that sperm can survive. And so you may be missing out on valuable time and valuable extra attempts at trying to get pregnant by over relying on these sticks. I have lots of issues with
You
it.
I like but it's helpful, right? Because
Yeah.
funny, when they were coming on the market, and I remember, like, the transition between them being, like, incredibly inaccessible for my patients, and then all of a sudden
Mm,
they were a dollar. And I
mhm.
remember thinking, like, "These little sticks are gonna put me out of a job," right? Like,
Yeah.
initially. I'm like, half the time, part of my success in helping patients conceive is to tell them when to have sex,
Right?
right? And I
Mhm.
was like,
Me too.
these little sticks are gonna change everything." But
Mhm.
when to start to realize that, like, part of the pathophysiology of PCOS is actually involves this hormone, which means now we're testing a thing that's not actually like, it's
Mhm.
part of the challenge with
Mhm.
PCOS, and we're registering these positives as being something positive,
Mhm.
when it actually
Is
isn't.
negative. Yeah,
It's
it's slowing the show down.
yeah, it's like it is part of the issue is that
Mhm.
this hormone is like, baseline high all the time. If anything, I see more infertility since those little
Those
kits have been
OPKs, I
invented.
know.
Yeah.
It's
But
it's
I did remember I
interesting.
had this moment where I was like, "Huh, all of a sudden everyone's gonna know when to have sex." But that is not what has translated from us having this, like, incredibly accessible, basically lab
Mhm.
tested home. It's done nothing to change
Mhm.
fertility rates in my practice.
No, honestly, I think the bigger game changer is the new proof test to be able to actually confirm that you ovulated in a different way through your urine. Like, I think that's a more valuable kit for a woman with PCOS to have at their house than having an ovulation predictor kit. Way more expensive, but it's actually looking for a urine metabolite that you did ovulate, that you have enough progesterone flowing through your body because you don't have an appreciable amount of progesterone unless you ovulated.
Mhm.
So I think that that's more of a game changer for fertility. It's more of a game changer, especially for PCOS, where another bit of the pathophysiology is not making enough progesterone a lot of the time. And so I see that being a major issue in sustaining a successful pregnancy when progesterone insufficiency is not helping someone hold or sustain the pregnancy. And that's putting more power, I think, in a woman's hands to be able to test that at home and see if their
Mhm.
progesterone's kind of falling off a cliff at a certain point. But it is interesting with LH. It's not necessarily a marker that I'm not a physician, so I don't diagnose PCOS, but we don't use it in the diagnosis of PCOS criteria because it isn't present for everyone, but it is present. I mean, you see it, I see it. I would say for the majority of people, the LH is usually, especially if you're looking at day 3 labs, if somebody has day 3 labs where you can compare your FSH and LH, I see in PCOS all the time 2, 3, sometimes 4 times the LH than FSH, which is not, they should be closer to equal, with even FSH being a little bit higher, like a tad higher. So it's an over relied upon, but I think it's so alluring for anyone at the beginning of their trying to conceive journey because it's information and that's what they're not typically getting. And
Mhm.
where does somebody go to learn what to look for? Like, thank God somebody early in my journey handed me Taking Charge of Your Fertility. Like, that was my foray into fertility awareness method. It was like the first time somebody showed me that I could know something on my own without having to go to the doctor to learn if I was ovulating. Because I don't know how many women know this. The only ways to tell if you're ovulating are for ultrasounds to watch a follicle grow and then blood tests to confirm progesterone. Other than that, it's basal body temping, like, is the name of the game for confirming ovulation. So it's one thing that a woman can do in their own home to try and preview it and try to time sex well. So I get the allure. It's just in the PCOS community, I think it slows things down versus helping the process along.
Mhm, mhm. And that hope is so important. Like, let's talk for a minute about just behavior change. And I think the some of the big goals, like when you and I are working with women, is that empowerment piece, right? And we were talking a little bit off camera before we started about how, like, honestly, the Instagram posts people like the most is the ones where we've like burned dinner and don't have our
Mhm.
shit together,
Mhm. Yeah,
right? Like
like
it's
where my kid runs through the room screaming, or yeah, or honestly, like, "Look, this dietitian ate a piece of pizza. She's
Yes, I get a
human."
lot of DMs about my food when people feel like I'm, like, off plan, which I find really
Uh,
interesting.
yeah.
But that, like, empowerment piece for women and giving them hope and helping them feel like they have a strategist, right? Like in
Mhm.
their life versus it just being a rote prescription. Like how
Mhm.
important do you feel like that is for the community of women that you work with?
Serve. I think that that's the magic in the sauce. Almost anybody could read a book about fertility awareness method and timing sex. You could read, there are some pretty good books on how to treat PCOS from a few different perspectives that you could get a lot of help with. But kind of the day in and day out, like cheerleading, I feel like I do a lot of that in my work, holding hands of just like looking at the cycle tracking and saying, yeah, you did ovulate. You ovulated last Saturday. Like, when did you have sex around that? Did you track that? And sometimes it's just like taking the pressure off. Oh, you didn't hit your fertile window once. So don't expect to get pregnant this cycle. At least I'm helping you not set yourself up for like one more period coming that shocked you. Like, I thought this was the cycle. But the empowerment, the making behavior change seem like something a woman can do after she's failed at everything else. Cause that's what diet culture feeds people. Like, oh, here's this flashy solution. Go keto. You'll fix your insulin resistance. It's like that's not a sustainable change. So somebody does it and like they're successful at it for 4 weeks and they lose 20 pounds and then they gain it back with a vengeance when they go off plan. Because everything they've ever tried before that's been this silver bullet and magic cure, they've failed at, right?
Mhm.
Because it wasn't just doing the not sexy thing. And I think sometimes what I do is I show up and say, hey, I know you want to go gluten and dairy free. I know you want to take Ovasitol. I know you want to do all these like these
Saying this
things.
all in a very sexy voice.
Yeah. But what you need to do is eat some protein at breakfast. Like,
And go
I
for a
don't
walk.
care.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't care if it's next to half a piece of toast. What you need to stop doing is getting a caramel macchiato on the way to work and having the chocolate that, at the nurse's station. Like, it's okay to have a bite of that sometimes, but having that every day is not serving you. And so I don't care if you don't need to go keto. You just need to stop eating the chocolate that somebody else provides to you at work. So sometimes it's just like saying, stop going for gold. Can we like bronze is placing? Like we don't need it to be the Olympic best. We just need you to be healthy and pregnant, right? And so sometimes that empowerment is just saying like it's not as hard as you think it is. And it's not this like miracle cure either. It's just taking these behavior changes one at a time, going for a walk, doing half an hour of yoga, making time in your schedule for acupuncture, like small things that are taking care of you, turning that stress level down. And I feel like in the last 6, 8, 9 months, my working with women is empowering them to manage their stress levels. And that has gotten people pregnant. I think that more than even telling them when to have sex is because everybody is on this just buzz right now. Like you just moved offices, like everybody's just got things going on they're functioning at this higher frequency, and we just need to kind of bring it down for everybody and say it's okay. It's okay to say no. It's okay to not do everything. One of the best things I think happened for a lot of people was having to stay at home.
Mhm, mhm. I have a lot of September pregnancies right now, I will say, and yes, that was coming out of the tail end of, like, a lot of change and a lot of stress, but I think I had more positive pregnancy tests in September in some really difficult cases, which is I don't think is a coincidence, right?
Not
It's
even
funny
a
you're
little
saying
bit.
about the food elimination, like, so often I'm going through and I will call it the very unsexy plan as well,
Mhm.
um, and when I get through going through it with women, like, "This is what we're gonna do," and they're like, "Okay, well, I hear you, but what foods do I have to take out?"
Mhm.
Right? And it's like, I almost, like, don't believe that that's, like, the actual solution is that
Mhm.
there are no foods that are off the table, but we just have to look at, like, the consistency and the pattern of it, right? I don't care if you eat
Mhm.
a peanut butter sandwich in a
Mhm.
hockey arena sometimes. You just can't do it
Right.
4 days a week, right?
Exactly. Like if you're my favorite food is pizza, and I'm gonna have it, but what I have it next to is a plate full of vegetables and sometimes like half of a chicken breast because I have to manage my PCOS if I'm gonna feel good. And those decisions are harder to make at the beginning, and then feeling good feels so good that it's easier to make those decisions. So if we can
Yes.
just lay a couple of the stones so that you can start getting that other gratification of energy, better quality sleep, feeling more comfortable in your own body, like all the things that it can pay forward for you, then it's easier to be at the nurse's station and go, I can't afford to just have an energy crash in an hour from now because I want half of that Snickers bar that's free. It's not serving me.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
it becomes easier to make those behavior changes, and those behavior changes actually just become your new routine and your new habit, because you see how it's paying off and how you're feeling.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like viewing those things as being a gift to yourself rather than
Yes.
a punishment, right? And like
Yes.
helping women like develop like lower tolerance for not feeling good, actually, right? Like
Mhm.
women can put up with a lot, and so they put up with the fatigue and the mood swings and all of those things. But when they get that glimmer of what it feels like to not feel that way, their tolerance for feeling bad starts to go down, right? And
Mhm.
it's helping support women to like get to that place where it's like,
Mhm.
I always use the example, I'm like, we've all seen the like 75-year-old man out for a run in the snow, right? And we're
Mhm.
like, oh my God, how is he out there? He doesn't even know it's snowing, right?
Right.
To him, it's so important that he goes. He doesn't care that it's
Mhm.
snowing, right?
Mhm.
And we need to get to that place with the chicken breast or with the whatever, where you
Mhm.
do it no matter what. You do it no matter what the weather is or how you feel or how long you
Mhm.
slept. You still eat the chicken, right? Because to
Mhm.
you, you can see that like just your tolerance for not having it is gone.
It's got yeah, exactly. And I think too, you see this all or nothing, like I'm either on plan or I'm off plan, or it feels like the plan has to be extreme if there's any chance of it working. But oftentimes, I'm sure you work this way in your practice, where you have to help somebody with low hanging fruit that's going to give them some big wins that we work on first, and then we layer in something next. If I just come in and slash out all your favorite foods, you might be able to do that for 3 or 4 weeks, but you're not gonna do that forever. Come on. Nobody can eat, like, bacon wrapped jalapeno cheese, cream cheese keto balls for breakfast forever. Eventually, you're gonna want a pancake. Like, that's just real life. So, how can I teach you if my goal is more protein at breakfast and less carb because I want to support your insulin values all day long and I want to support what you're drawn to all day long? Newsflash, if you eat a really sugary, carby breakfast, you're going to crave that kind of stuff all day long. So, if I can just low hanging fruit change one meal, I might actually change a few other meals in the day, what you're naturally drawn to by just changing this one meal at the beginning of the day. So I'm not coming in and saying cut out all gluten and dairy. I'm saying, can you throw like 2 eggs next to that protein smoothie that you are maybe used to making in the morning? Like, what can I do to kind of improve and maybe crowd off the plate the other stuff, but not say that it's forbidden and bad and wrong? Because that, like, don't push the red button. All it does is draw attention to red button and make you want to push it.
Mhm. Yeah, and comes back to that idea of trust, right? Where women
Mhm.
don't feel like they can even trust themselves to feed themselves, and so they
Mhm.
want these strict, hardcore rules because that
Mhm.
feels safer,
Mhm.
actually, than being told, "Just don't do that all the time." Right?
Mhm.
Like, that's so vague, right? Like, that's like,
Mhm.
we're putting the power in her, and but she already doesn't trust herself to do
Mhm.
the thing, so she wants this, like, hardcore rule to say, "Well, never again," and Jordan
Mhm.
said, I can't do that," right? Whereas instead, what
Mhm.
I'm trying to do is empower her to understand, like, how does food make you feel? Therefore, you feel
Exactly.
more empowered to make that decision, so that when I'm not there, you know how to
Yeah,
eat at the baby shower because
right.
you know,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
understand how the food makes you feel.
Yeah. I mean, I do have never again lists. Soda's probably at the top of it, but, like
True.
pizza
I always forget about
or
soda.
like, you know, my husband likes to make cheesecake for my birthday. I'm not gonna tell you not to have cheesecake on your birthday. Are you kidding me? Like a good New York cheesecake? But frankly, like if I go to somebody's party and they just bought like Safeway or Kroger's cheesecake, it's just not going to compare to
Not
me.
worth it.
It's not worth how it's going to make me feel. It's not even like it's not worth the calories. It's just like it's not worth the hormonal disruption or the headache. And so sometimes it's like when you're going to do it, make it worth it. Make sure it's like if you're going to eat the pasta, make sure it's really, really good. Like don't blow your wad on like the bird's eye frozen penne from the grocery store. Like, wait for it to be like that handmade pasta sauce when the Italian restaurants finally can seat our butts in the chair again. So yeah, use
That's
your
going to be
budget
the clip.
wisely.
That's going to be
Yeah,
the clip for this episode. Don't blow your wad on the frozen penne.
exactly.
So,
Uh,
Caitlin, just to like kind of sum everything up, like I always ask at the end of an interview, like, I think your passion for what you do is in everything you say. But if you had like just one big take home message for our women who are listening, what would that be? Like, what's your passion project? Why are you here?
Hope. I think like if I could change PCOS, like the acronym to hope, I would. Maybe I'll come up with a way to do that. It's so possible to manage your PCOS. It is so possible to have babies with PCOS, whether you can do it naturally or you need a little extra help. And there's no shame in that, but it's so possible. It's Christmas. I'm looking in at my house, the Christmas lights and the Christmas tree while we're recording this. And I remember 5 Christmases ago having my whole family over and my nieces, and I remember making Christmas cookies and dancing in homemade tutus to the Nutcracker and feeling so empty because I did not have my own baby yet. And little did I know that all the work that I was doing was about to pay off the next cycle and we were about to be ready to conceive. But I remember that feeling more than anything else, and feeling like there wasn't a lot of hope. And that's what I want to change. I want to even re-enliven the Nutcracker home dances with your nieces and nephews so that you can enjoy those moments along the way, because there is so much hope in this. And there are women like Jordan, there are women like me, there are many others of us with really great evidence-based answers to how to handle these health conditions. PCOS is just one of them, where we can put the power back into your hands with the unsexy things like diet and lifestyle change and lowering your stress. And like, can we just talk about sleep? Like, if women could just sleep better, it would be easier to not reach for that 3 o'clock Starbucks run. If we can impact the hope and give people just a sense that their future is not written before them, they can change the narrative. They're in charge of the story. And to find somebody like Jordan, join a program, read a book. There's a lot of resources out there to put the power back in your hands and to have the success and live the life's dream that you want. Be a mom. It's available to you.
Whew, you got me with your Nutcracker story. I teared up. One of my miscarriages was at Christmas, and I
Yeah.
remember like just so much like what that whole experience was like, and through the like, just sitting in the ER for 10 million
Mhm.
hours to then be sent
Mhm.
home with like I was reliving that whole experience through your story. Thank you so much, Caitlin. Like you
Yes.
speak so beautifully. You have such a way of like, creating hope in your words. I'm just so grateful that you spent time with me today. How can our listeners, well, first of all, they have to go follow you on Instagram, which
Yeah.
we're going to put the link.
At PCOS Fertility Nutrition. That's the best way to find me right now. Like, I have an in-town practice where I have dietitians that see everything, and then I like don't even have a website for everything I do PCOS related. So at PCOS Fertility Nutrition on Instagram, I do co-host a podcast with a gal pal and fertility RD named Sophia. That's called Food Freedom and Fertility. We have a website, foodfreedomfertility.com. And you can get lots of free content really around this. And it's not only PCOS related. And we interview experts, and sometimes we curse. It's not perfect. It's just 2 girls having coffee or tea and talking about food and fertility and how we can help you. And those are the main ways I work with women one-on-one. I have an online course for PCOS fertility. It's called Find Fertility with PCOS. At the moment, it's not open. Follow me if you're interested in that in the future. But thank you for having me. I'm so happy to chat with women like you and the work that you do in this podcast. I mean, it's a pleasure to be in this space right now, to be serving women. And I feel like my work has such purpose. And what you do, think about the generations you impact, like not just mom and baby, but like that baby's baby. It's that it's amazing. And you used the word earlier. I feel like this is sacred work. And I don't think that that's overstating it even a little bit. So that's where people can find me. Come hang out with me on Instagram. It's me. There's nobody else managing my account, at least at
Yep.
this point. So
An
you'll
awesome
get
job.
me if you're there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. It's my absolute passion to bring women quality and science-informed information about their health so that they can make empowered, good decisions about their health care. I'd like to invite you to join me in my Facebook community, Women's Health Unplugged. There we share live videos, blog posts, and behind-the-scenes information about the podcast where you can connect with me and other women who are interested in their health care. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/WH Unplugged. We'll see you there.